Hi, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is my 1981 Dodge Mitsubishi Challenger Lancer Sapporo Scorpion, which is still broken. But I think I have everything I need to fix it. Let's get to it. In case you haven't been following along with this project, I saved this thing out of a local junkyard several months ago. I got it running and driving again, but it had some braking issues and, well, it ran like crap and made 0 horsepower. So I've made a bunch of improvements in different places. I've fixed all the brakes at this point, mostly. I painted the wheels, not that you can see that right now. I washed the car, that was nice. I've started doing some touch-ups and things. And I did manage to find some extra horsepower in the 2.6 liter Mitsubishi engine under the hood. A lot of people are following along with this project. Many people have said that they're excited about it. They're rooting for it, and they want to see more videos. I'm going to keep kicking the ball down the road here, and hopefully by the end of this one, I will have an actually kind of sort of drivable 81 Challenger. At the end of the last episode, I was trying to fix the steering linkage. The outer tie rods in this car are embarrassingly bad. I tried to replace the driver's side one first. Turned out that these threads were gacked forever ago. It would not come apart. I managed to get it out of there with tons and tons of heat, and then I tried to tap this sleeve and fix it so I could put a new tie rod in because they weren't readily available. And then I broke off my tap in the sleeve and gave up. At the end of the last video, I said I was going to order these tie rod sleeves for a Ram 50, which is a very closely related Mitsubishi truck chassis. They're a little longer, which makes sense, you know, pickup truck. But they're very similar. They are the right thread, and I think I can make them work one way or another. Here I've got the original inner tie rod where it was, and the new outer tie rod set in place. They're aimed at each other. I took measurements and made sure it was roughly where it was when I took it apart. It looks to me as though this sleeve would probably fit just barely. Now, as you saw on the table there, it's a good bit longer than the originals. But to use this, I would be eliminating these jam nuts because these clamp tight instead. So it can extend not only where the jam nut was, but also slightly past. I think it would work. The concern would be running out of adjustability here. I may not be able to get the toe right if these tie rods bottom out in this sleeve. I don't think they will though. If that does become a problem, what I can do is just cut the ends off. You know, even like 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch cut off of each end of that is not going to make a big difference. They'll still be able to clamp. That would help give more room for adjustability. But I think for now, I'm going to try and just let it ride as it is. I am going to clean up these threads on the original inner tie rod. As mentioned before, these inners are nowhere near as wasted as the outers are, so I feel good about leaving them there, but things are a little yucky. I find it so interesting that the threads on the outer tie rod were destroyed like that, but the threads on the inner tie rod are perfect. The advantage of that enclosed sleeve design is there's no way for moisture to get in here except for sneaking past the nut on this end. A typical method I use for getting tie rod ends roughly back where the originals were when I replace them is counting the number of turns it takes to remove them, essentially counting the number of threads. And because the number of threads will be consistent between the old one and the new one, or it should be, you should at least end up close. Of course, in this case, because the sleeve is now much longer than it was, it takes many more turns to get back to where the previous part was, so that does nothing for me. What I'm going to do instead is keep this spindle right where it is, thread the new one into the sleeve to roughly where I think it needs to be, and then play with that until I can get the taper to go right in here. There's no question it's going to be off a little bit. There is no question it's going to need an alignment after this, but it will hopefully end up close enough to drive. Here's how much space I've got. So I can tighten this sleeve in even more if I need to and close that gap, but I think we're pretty close. I'm pleased with that. So I guess it's time to get into the right side and see how ruined that one is. Now before I move on, I do want to tell you how I found these sleeves. You might be thinking I just hopped over to the Rock Auto and said, give me Ram 50 sleeves, but actually what I did was find this. This is Moog's Universal Adjusting Sleeve Chart. And as you can see, it's got short ones, and you scroll down and it's got long ones, and it's got different end types and different threads. So I just kind of went through and found the one that said M14 1.5. Was it this one? I think it's this one that I bought. Anyway, my point is, if you're trying to piece something together like this, where maybe the parts aren't necessarily listed, or you're building something custom from scratch, this Moog site is a great resource to try and find this. They also have a really good one for U-joints. Recall, if you will, I did order lower ball joints for the front end of this car. Because the boots on them are ripped, I figured that was probably a smart decision. And they actually happen to have them at Rock Auto. I was ordering everything else, so what the heck. But they don't actually seem to have any play in them. And the way to test lower ball joints is you get the front tires just off the ground, then you take a big pry bar or something similar, put it under the tire, and then flex the tire up and down. With it hovering like this in the air, you really can't do it by hand, but doing the pry bar method like that, you basically take the weight off the ball joint, you remove all tension from it, and if you see play at that point, it's bad. These don't do that, so for now, I'm gonna let them ride. The steering components, on the other hand, not good. Look at the amount of play in that idler arm. That's crazy. And the outer tie rod here, which I still haven't changed, very similar. What do you think of this? That shouldn't be like that. Also, for some reason, I'm only just noticing that the right side tie rod assembly doesn't have a sleeve at all. The inner tie rod has the whoop-de-doo just like the other one, but instead of having a little sleeve, it's just cast all the way to here. And it's got female threads in it. I sure hope that survives, because that would be bad. Okay, so I got the cotter pin out in one piece somehow, even though it looked like crap. This came loose, no problem. And this, although I did whack my shoulder into the bottom of the car, knocking it loose, it's now moving just fine. They make multiple tools to separate tie rods like this. There are little press tools that use a bolt. Then, of course, there's your standard pickle fork. My chosen method, as always, is to smash it with a hammer. Well, it'll work eventually. Come on. There you go. I counted the turns on this one, put it back where it was, and it seems to be right. I straightened the spindles out again and just kind of eyeballed them front to back, and they look close. Again, I'm confident this toe is going to need to be adjusted at some point. It should be somewhat drivable. Now I'm doing the idler arm. So I removed the cotter pin, I took the castle nut off, and I smacked this with a hammer. Yeah, this is not what you want, really. Of all the things contributing to this car not handling the best, this may be about the worst offender. This bracket and arm setup is pretty similar to a lot of different applications. GM, for example, used this forever. The typical Chrysler design just has an arm that is bolted onto the cross member. Anyway, as you can see, it's secured to the frame rail here with 2 bolts. They have nuts on the back side I had to hold with a wrench. You can see these steel sleeves inside the frame rail there. That's what keeps the rail from collapsing when these bolts are tightened. And there's the new arm installed. What a massive improvement. I've got all of the castle nuts torqued. I just need to pin them, and I do have Zerk fittings to put in these tie rods. I might even add some grease now, although they ship with grease in there. Front end, front-ended. Yay! Now at this point, I'd love to just take it for a test drive, but while it's in the air, there's one more thing I really need to deal with. I couldn't find one of these isolators to buy. I'm sure there's one out there somewhere, but I didn't have any luck with that. Here's what I'm thinking though. Originally, this is like a pillow. It's like a rubber sack kind of thing, centering the drive shaft in the middle and with air between the different layers of rubber. What I think I'm gonna do is take this apart, cut this, and layer some rubber in there. Essentially just build it back up so it'll hold the drive shaft centered. It won't have as much isolation as it did originally, but hopefully I can do this in a way that doesn't cause bits of rubber to end up rubbing on the drive line and making bad smells, and it'll hold the drive shaft better than this does. Okay, I'll be the first to tell you this is kind of hacky, but it is way better than when I started. There's very little play in that now. What I did was I cut up an old inner tube into strips. Then, through the horrible cracks in the side of that bushing, I passed those strips folded up and kind of shoved them up into place with a screwdriver. I packed it just about as solid as I could. Now the application of the Gorilla Tape, that's just to try and keep the little bits from coming loose, should they ever decide to work their way out. This should be very obvious, but this is a temporary solution. The right thing to do here would be to get some urethane and cast a new bushing. I don't have any on hand, and well, I kind of want to get this thing off the lift and see what it's like with the fresh steering. So this is definitely an improvement. Hopefully it hangs on for a while, and I'll come up with something better down the line. I continue to get comments about the Weber carburetor, many of them to the tune of, "The Weber sucks, throw it away." I'm inclined to disagree. I can see the potential of this thing. It's actually pretty simple once you understand it. And so far, after going through it, I'm very pleased with the performance. The only problem continues to be the accelerator pump discharge, and I've had a comment that may help to solve that. Recall in the last episode, I was contemplating adding a check ball below the accelerator pump discharge nozzle. That essentially would keep air from flowing back into the circuit, and it would allow it to stay primed with fuel in between accelerator pump discharges. Well, it turns out they have a check ball, and it's in the screw, which both feeds the nozzle and secures it in place. Now, as you can hear, this one is moving. This is from the other carburetor. This is the one I just took out of this carburetor. It's also moving. So I don't know if that's the issue or not, but I'm gonna spray this one out and then try it, and we'll see if that makes any difference. Now again, there is a check ball in the body, and it's in a goofy passageway there that would be very difficult to access. But I know fuel is getting past it because we do have some pump shot. So my hope is that this is the issue. And if this one will hold correctly, we might just get an accelerator pump shot that does something. My neighbor loves burning garbage so much. Smells delightful. Also, the sun's out. That's weird. In hand, this thing works perfectly. I can blow through it, and I get air out of both nozzles. And when I suck on it, no flow happens in the opposite direction. So that should work. Well, it had a pump shot till I ran all the fuel out. Hopefully it's better. I don't know. I'm still not prepared to try and extract this brass plug and get to the other check ball, so we'll see. Yeah, no, it's the same. Oh. Okay, it's not great, but it is actually almost better sometimes. Or maybe I imagine that. Why am I driving this right now? I still need to change the thermostat, and putting belts on it would be a really good idea. Oops, dug a hole in the yard. Too much horsepower. Not only are the brakes not better, they might be worse. Let's try the brake self-adjusting technique, which is backing up and slamming on the pedal, essentially. Yep, the rears are adjusted. Not entirely sure the fronts are doing anything. And why did that gear just grind? Well, the steering feels tighter, that's the good news. I don't think the clutch is fully disengaging. Well, I still feel a bit of vibration out of the car, so that was a nice idea. To buy tires. Yeah, the brake pedal does something now. It just doesn't feel right, you know? There's gotta be air in there still. And I don't understand how. What, I'm like 6 times now? Yeah, that's good fun. It does mostly go straight. It might kind of sort of wander left a little bit. Would you rather 1980 whatever edition? Yeah, it's the rear wheel drive Hemi one for me. Now, if it were a Conquest, that might be a different story. You know, this is actually kind of an interesting lineup. It's like the evolution of cars over the late 70s until the early 90s. I don't know why I like this thing so much. I just do. What? This is not snacks. Go away. Go away. So I guess I just have a flock of ducks now. Et tu, chicken? Haha! For some reason, the local guys don't have the beefier half-inch belts in their cheapo line, so they had to get me a real Gates, and it cost real money. Anyway, now I can finally put belts on this thing. And then it needs a thermostat, and an oil change, and the headlights replaced, and I think that's it for now. I should probably check the gear oil and the axle and the transmission fluid. And tires. Tires. Wow. Yeah, I've seen some stuff. Knocking all this grime off made it so much nicer to work in here. It's a little thing, but it pays dividends. Belt? Belted. I did have a comment about removing the cooling fan and switching to an electric one. Of course, this is a tiny engine, and any horsepower saved is worth saving. At least this is a clutch fan, and that clutch seems to be fairly loose. I don't know, it definitely creates some drag. There's no question of that. I may consider that in the future. Pulled the basically irreplaceable grill again, and I cracked it, which is really dumb. Of course, it's already cracked in 3 slightly less noticeable places, but now it's cracked in 4, and I don't like that. Now, I've discussed this many times, but when it comes to headlights in my classics, I am 100% against LEDs. I just hate the look. I hate the way they work. I hate the way they shine. I hate the light spectrum they usually work in. In general, I prefer to keep a factory-type sealed beam housing. No, I don't want the plasticky housings that you can put replaceable bulbs in the back of. I want these. Now, in most cases, I will go for a slightly brighter than standard type bulb. But in this case, this is what they had. And I know that just fresh factory type bulbs are going to be better than one I have now. Just looking at what's on the car, you can tell that this high beam has been replaced, and the rest are, well, much older. Usually with these rectangular units, you can just remove the top 2 screws and carefully bend the bezel down. Also, I should point out, the last time I did rectangular headlights, I sliced my finger open. It's hard to tell on camera, but the driver's side one is fresh and it sure looks better. Yay! I think that's enough for today. I'll get back to this thing after Christmas, and we'll go ahead and do the Fram oil filter delete. The 81 Challenger is officially now being used for vet taxi services. Quit peeing on the floor. We've time traveled once again, but I've finally got the 81 Challenger back in the bay for a couple more improvements. No, they do not include installing the R3 block with the W9 heads on it. That's not happening. I've been driving the crap out of this car around town, and I really do enjoy it. I've only had a couple slight issues that I'd like to address right now. Number 1, there's no functional heater. It gets kind of lukewarm, but it's certainly not boiling me out of the cab. And I'm sure that's down to a bad thermostat here, which I've had the replacement for in a box for the last month. Number 2, I'm getting kind of a whump, whump, whump noise, which I'm pretty sure is a disintegrating tire. So I need to get tires put on this thing. First, though, I've noticed that the front wheels both seem to be sitting at a bit of a funky angle. So, number 3 is, what's up with that? I don't think I've done anything at all with this cooling system yet. It looks great, and it's completely full. Even the overflow tank is right at the full mark. I'm sure it's due for a flush and a complete coolant change, and it'll get that soon enough when I do the cylinder head job. For now, I only need to drain enough coolant to get the level below the thermostat, so I can swap that out without making a giant mess. A chunk of hose attached to the radiator drain and a clean coolant catcher make this job pretty quick and easy. Well, that was touch and go for a minute there. This rear bolt didn't want to come out. Probably need to run a tap down that one. Hopefully I won't break it this time. Warning, not a pry bar, chisel, or punch. But it doesn't say hammer. Nice. It's a weird looking one. And yeah, can see daylight through there. So it's stuck partway open. That explains it. While I'm here, I couldn't help myself but delete more extra emissions equipment. These are thermo switches. They're temperature-controlled vacuum switches. There have been no hoses going to these for years and years, so we might as well simplify things, lighten the load a bit, and throw these in the garbage. I'll be replacing them with your typical pipe plugs. If you're familiar with my plans for this car, then you'll know this intake manifold is scheduled for replacement, and it probably won't be here very long anyway. So deleting these switches may be a bit of a waste of time, but then so is putting a thermostat in it. Good thing I ruined the original gasket before realizing this one wasn't quite right. I decided to try my chances just sending that messed up bolt back in there, and it went and didn't break or totally strip the hole, thankfully, but it did leak at first when I added coolant back in. Had to snug the bolt again, and now it's fine. So about that whole front end alignment thing. Yeah, it's not adjustable. There are no factory camber bolts. There is no way to change the alignment of the front wheels. The only thing you can do is adjust the toe, of course. It's easy enough to check that with an extra pair of hands and a tape measure or two. I don't have an extra pair of hands. I do actually own a Quick Trick alignment kit, but I think it's hiding in the trunk of my other Challenger. You know, the actually Challenger looking Challenger. And I can't be bothered to go grab it. Anyway, I think all that means it's fine. The heater's actually warm now and the temperature gauge is moving. Miracle of miracles. Tasty. Have you seen that middle generation Challenger meme that's all over the internet? I think like 20 or 30 people have sent that to me or tagged me in it. It's ridiculous. Ooh, rainbow. Pot of gold. Anyway, I noticed this thing was steaming a minute ago when I pulled up, so I gotta pop the hood and check that. Hopefully it's just residual coolant from the thermostat housing, boo-boo. That's not residual, it like blew everywhere, so... Is it the stupid bolt? Is it the gasket that doesn't fit right? No idea. Hey, never open your radiator cap when it's hot. Anyway. It's still pretty full. Definitely don't do this when your engine is hot. This is one of those fancy leftover tools from when I was a real mechanic. It's a cooling system pressure tester. I also happen to have all the fancy adapters. It's a good tool for diagnosing leaks, so I'm going to carefully pressurize this still slightly hot system and see what I can see. I said doing this while it's hot is a really bad idea, right? Okay, just making sure. There's a waterfall over here. Yay! All right, those bolts are as tight could be, and still, there's a little bit of seepage. Why is this brand new thermostat gasket dissolving into like, I don't know, lint? I got that from the local guys, which was apparently a mistake. Usually it's Felpro or don't bother for me. Well, it's almost holding steady around 15 PSI, so I'm just gonna leave it alone for now. I guess I'll get a Felpro replacement for that piece of garbage later. As I've mentioned, this car desperately needs tires. The ones that are on it now are just barely old enough to drink. I cannot drive this car on the highway until I get that sorted out. But there's kind of a problem, and that is the availability of 14-inch tires. You see, back in the bad old days, 14 and 15-inch tires were the norm. They were everywhere on every vehicle on the road. So you could buy them in all sorts of different sizes and at any store. Nowadays, even Grandma's Camry's rolling on 17s, and just about everything Chrysler sells comes with 20s. What I'd like to do is to get some meat on the back of this car. Kind of sort of try and get at that staggered muscle car look. Unfortunately, finding a wider tire in a similar height is proving challenging. I was even thinking about sourcing some different wheels. I found these. Kind of awesome, but they're the wrong bolt pattern. For some reason, the Mitsubishi uses a 4 on 4.5 pattern instead of the typical 4 on 4.25 or 100 millimeter or whatever the heck it is that everything else used. In the meantime, I really want to be able to put some highway miles on this car and test it out. So I think I'm just going to get 4 of these factory 195 70R14s put on the thing so I can drive it. It's kind of a considerable expense if I then throw them away later, but I suppose I could reuse them for an A-body or something. Now there's a Challenger. I'm not sure about the color. The 81 Challenger has left me walking. Well, I am thirsty. Yep, they're new tires. Okay, well, the new rubber hasn't helped the traction at all so far. The one rear tire just likes to spin. But now that we've got 4 hunks of rubber on the wheels that are almost certainly round, I'm gonna take this thing for a highway test drive, something I have not been able to do yet. We'll see what it's like. If it survives this experience, I suppose I'll have to drive it to Rocket next week. I'm not feeling that wump, wump, wump thing anymore, so that's a good sign. These are long-legged gears. I'm in third at 55, and okay, now I guess it wants a shift. I don't think you actually need overdrive at all. It's going in a straight line, feels solid. My brand new sealed beams, of course, are total garbage next to everyone else's headlights, but it was a nice idea. You know, I always thought the left lane was for passing, but other people don't see it that way, I've noticed. Just purrs along, no problem at all. Remind me to bleed the brakes for a 30th time. Whee! I couldn't see this road at all, but I know it's here. All right, high speed run. Traction in second, really bad. So, limited slip differential. What a good idea. There's not a whole lot of point in making a bunch more horsepower if you can't actually get it to the ground. And yes, Of course, I realized that bigger tires would help that, but as mentioned, it wasn't really an option right now. I don't know what that smell is, but I'm hoping it's not me. Kind of smells like a Christmas tree on fire. Oh yeah, brakes. Oh, this is just stupidly fun. I think it needs firmer springs in the front, and I also think it needs a bigger sway bar. Yeah. If you have the opportunity to buy one of these little things, I highly recommend it. Hashtag drift cart. Oh yeah, buddy. You can just whip it around. Oh, it's good. Needs a limited slip. No fresh smoke in here, and not much coolant either, so I think we're good. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty well impressed with this. At this point, I'm confident I can safely hop in this thing and drive it wherever. And that'll be good for keeping the mileage off my actual good Challenger. I'm definitely looking forward to giving it the Rocket Restoration's commute test. That's an hour drive each way to Olympia, Washington from here in Aberdeen. It's a good way to shake down a vehicle. I just remembered I still need to change the oil. I'll do that at some point. There are plenty of little things left to do on the car, but for now, I think most of them are ignorable. My favorite kind of problem. There's a whole lot more touch-up work to do. I think I'm just going to do this entire top of quarter trunk window surround area. That makes a lot of sense. Haven't put the badges on. But again, ignorable problems. You know, at least a few people have said that this car should be a weekly feature. No, it's been a bi-weekly feature up until now, but I think it's going to be a while till we see it next. I'm just going to drive it and use it as a car while I figure out my next steps. Further cosmetic improvements, a limited slip in the rear, and more horsepower are definitely on that list. But you'll have to wait a while to see any of that. Until then, as ever, thank you very much for watching. And remember, if you don't have goals, how will you never achieve them?